Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you in the second day of the conference organized by National Labor Inspectorate in Poland, titled Labor Inspection and Challenges of the Future. Good morning to these of you who are gathered here in Wrocław and to those who are participating in the event online. We can start the fifth session of the conference. Like yesterday, taking care of the proper course of the event, I'm asking all speakers to respect the time limit of the presentation, which is 30 minutes. It will allow to all participants to take active part in the conference. Like yesterday, I would also like to encourage online participants to ask questions to the speakers during their presentations. The ongoing session is not ending with the question and answer stage, although questions raised by you will be asked, if the time allows, on the panel discussion concluding second day of the conference. On the second day, consisting two sessions, we will reflect on recommendations and support for National Labor Inspectorate from international and European organizations and institutions in context of present and future challenges of the world of labor. Representatives of 5 organizations and institutions, European Commission, International Association of Labor Inspection, International Labour Organization, European Agency for Safety and Health at Work, and International Social Security Association will share with us their point of view. In the beginning of the fifth session, I would like to give the floor to the chair of the Senior Labour Inspector Committee and head of Unit Health and Safety at Work in European Commission, Mrs. Charlotte Grefforel-No, who will introduce presentation titled Addressing the Occupational Safety and Health Challenges when Enforcing EU-OSHA legislation. Charlotte, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Chief Labor Inspector, dear Michael, and dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. I am really pleased to be here in Poland with you today. And first of all, before addressing the presentation, I would warmly like to thank you for this invitation and also for the lovely, lovely evening yesterday, delicious meal and a wonderful tour in your beautiful city. I think we are really privileged to now be able to meet again in person and of course also to rely on the possibility to attend online. So with these very good starting circumstances, I would like to address the presentation which I'm going to make about occupational safety and health challenges when we are enforcing EU-OSHA legislation. I will first say a few words about the quite newly adopted EU strategic framework on safety and health at work. It is our core document and our guidance when we act at the EU level on the OSHA level for the coming 7 years. And then in a second part of my presentation, say a few words on the work we have with the Senior Labour Inspectors Committee, of which Poland holds a very prominent part and a special position where we think from the Commission side that we always can rely on the Polish expertise and engagement. And this is, of course, very precious for us. So, first of all, the background and the context of the EU strategic framework. Well, the 2 recent years have, of course, been very special for all of us and in a broader context, but specifically also for OSH when it comes to the COVID pandemic. It highlighted the importance of health and safety at work, especially for those who had to work even during the lockdowns. And when we were preparing this strategic document, this of course had to be taken into account. We can see a significant progress in workers' protection in the EU, with a reduction of fatal accidents at work by 70% since the OSH directives were adopted and enforced, I should say, 1994, until 2018. But still, as much as 3,300 workers die from accidents at work, and 200,000 workers from work-related illnesses every year. So this is, of course, tragedies in each and every worker's families and personal context, but it also brings annual costs of the work-related accidents and illnesses in the EU to as much as 3.3 GDP, which is about 460 billion euros. So when we started to do the work to update and to have a new strategic framework, we could see that there was a broad consensus from all the stakeholders that we are dealing with. The European Parliament, the Council, all the national authorities and social partners. So building on a lot of consultation, national implementation reports, feedback from our tripartite advisory committee on safety and health at work, an important opinion also from SLIC, and as I said, also from the Council in forms of several Council conclusions and feedback from the European Parliament. We have adopted this updated vision for occupational safety and health around three key objectives: change, prevention, and preparedness. And you see we have put them in colors in the circle, but what is just as important as the key objectives is the circle around, which is needed in order to make sure that these key objectives can really happen, that they can really be achieved. And there you see I've underlined enforcement, because enforcement is really key when it comes to achieving good the level we want of health and safety at work. The others, of course, you know very well, also social dialogue, funding from the EU level. We have quite a lot to offer. Awareness raising, and there we have, of course, our colleagues in the agency in Bilbao, and evidence gathering, which is done at the Commission level together with colleagues in the Eurostat directorate. So if we look a little bit closer to the key objectives, first of all, the one related to change. So here, this is really an objective that it comes in the context of the green and digital transition that the Commission is working on. In the area of OSH, it concretely means, for example, modernizing and simplifying EU rules, among others, to review the workplace and the display screen equipment directives. Even before the pandemic, we saw that the workplace directive is no longer really fit for purpose. The definition is not what we have as workplaces today. And also when we look at the display screen equipment directive, there are definitely parts that are not longer in state of the art. So this work is ongoing. It is being done together with this tripartite committee I was mentioning, the Health and Safety at Work Advisory Committee. And then, together again with this committee, we are looking at protective limits for hazardous chemicals which are linked to the green transition, such as asbestos. And here, very recently, just a month ago, the Commission adopted a quite comprehensive package on asbestos at work, very concretely on the OSH side, there is a proposal to lower the limit value for exposure to asbestos. But it comes together with a bigger communication that also envisage to treat asbestos from more of a life cycle perspective. So first of all, screening of buildings to make sure that we know where the asbestos is, with an important proposal that will come next year for a directive on screening. This is not in the OSHA area, but still interesting to know. Then, of course, the workers' aspect when removing asbestos, but then also when it comes to waste management. So this will now be discussed first in Council and then in Parliament, and then we hope that we will have, for the limit value, a new directive soon. In the frame of this change subject, we also are looking at the psychosocial and economic risks, and particularly with connection to digitalization. And then moving to the second of the key objective, which is prevention, where we have a special notion of Vision Zero approach to work-related deaths to live up to. And here as well, update EU rules on hazardous chemicals to combat cancer, reproductive and respiratory diseases. One important substance that we are dealing with now, hoping to have a proposal for a better limit value by the end of the year, is lead, which is a very well-known reprotoxic substance. Also addressing occupational circulatory diseases, because indeed we have been dealing a lot of with substances and aspects related to cancer, also with the Beating Cancer Plan at EU level, and you see 52% of the work-related fatalities are due to cancer, but we see the 24% actually are linked to circulatory diseases, and here, at least at EU level, we don't have enough evidence and we don't know enough about this. So that is part of this second key objective, where we're working closely with the agency. Then there is also part of this line, workplaces for all, that's linked to gender mainstreaming, better workplaces for persons with disabilities, and tackling workplace violence and harassment. Then the third one, increasing preparedness and responding rapidly to threats. Here, again, linked to the crucial role that we saw that OSHA had during the times of the pandemic crisis, we saw a need to develop EU guidance for potential future health threats. And also linked to this, to ensure OSHA standards for seasonal and migrant workers, and to carry out an update of the communication, the Commission recommendation on occupational diseases to include COVID-19. And this work is actually ongoing with the view to have the updated recommendation already by the end of the year. And here, of course, you know this is a recommendation to member states, so it's not binding, but still. It will be very, very useful, because what we are proposing is really a definition, so that we can see how to see and evaluate COVID in terms of occupational disease. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's very important to have this support components to enable the key objectives to be realized. So a strong social dialogue, a strengthened evidence base, funding from the EU level, and of course what we are very interested here today, improved enforcement of OSH legislation. And it's also very linked to awareness raising in this area. So then, if we are looking more concretely on how to enforce related actions by various actors, how we are doing this, anticipating and managing change, Well, they're the update of the national legal frameworks to address OSH risks and opportunities related to green and digital transitions. We are asking in the strategic framework member states to focus on the use of digital tools to make labor inspection more efficient by preventing and detecting breaches of legislation. So this is, of course, not an obligation, but it is a very strong encouragement, and we would like to send this signal to all member states across the EU. The enforcement aspect related to the prevention key objective is linked to the promotion of the Vision Zero approach to work-related deaths by strengthening the enforcement. So there we are supporting the Senior Labour Inspectors Committee in increasing awareness on reducing work-related deaths at company level by sharing good practices and supporting increased training for labour inspectorates. And then, finally, the key objective related to increased preparedness and responding rapidly to threats. There, a lot of good work has been done by the Senior Labour Inspectors Committee, so to develop guidance for labour inspector on assessing the quality of risk assessment and risk management measures under the Biological Agents Directive, and this was done already this year. And also to increase monitoring and effective inspections of OSH obligations towards seasonal workers in high-risk professions. Finally, to strengthen cooperation and exchange of information between labour inspectorates and other relevant national authorities to improve health and safety standards in all employment sectors. So when it comes then to the impact of the EU-OSHA strategic framework on enforcement, we hope that the strategic framework will help to improve the application and enforcement of existing EU law. So, for example, in the work of labour inspectors supported by the relevant actors, SLEEK, Advisory Committee, and the EU-OSHA. And by providing labour inspectors with EU-level and national guidance and training to promote cooperation and innovative inspection methods, it will help to improve consistent enforcement across all the member states. And with that, I would like to come to the second part of the presentation, which is to say a few words about the Senior Labour Inspectors Committee. And of course, many of you are in the room, so that will not be news for you, but I think it is very important also for those who are not so familiar with this very important committee online and perhaps also in the room. So just to recall, so that this is a committee that was formally set up by a Commission decision already in 1995. So this is not something new. Since the very, very beginning, it was really felt needed to have this forum of exchange at EU level. The body provides opinions on the enforcement of EU-OSHA legislation and promotes knowledge sharing on labour inspection practices. So the structure of it is that it consists of representatives of labour inspectorate services of 27 member states, so one full member per member state and one alternate member. And then we also count observers from the EEA-EFTA countries, EU-OSHA and ILO. And SLEEK's activities, they are organized by a bureau which functions like an executive body. It consists of the member states' representatives which hold the current presidency of the Council of the EU, so that's the Czech Republic for the time being, and flanked by the former presidency, so now France, and the incoming presidency. So in this case, as we talk today, it's Sweden. And then we have working groups that are set up with specific mandates, and each member must possess the appropriate expertise. Here you see how the current SLIC structure looks like. It is, of course, not written in stone, and over the years it has changed depending on the priorities and what has been most important to deal with. But you see in blue up to the left, we have the whole body, the 27, that works together then with the bureau. Up to the right, also blue upright. Then we have a very important working group, which is the working group strategy, who is really collaborating closely with the bureau. And then, well, I shouldn't say important because they are all important, but strategically important. Then the others, the working group on the general enforcement aspects. We have also the working group which are dealing with chemicals, MACHEX, machinery, MX, that's the emerging risks, specific working group on biological agents, physical agents. Then there are different ad hoc groups, thematic days, preparations, evaluations, and also SLIC campaign groups. And you see, and sort of a basis is the knowledge sharing system, KSS, which is enabling members to put questions to all the other SLIC members about enforcement and labor inspection, and to receive the replies. So this is very, very shortly in a nutshell how the structure looks. The SLIC has a work plan which very much mirrors the strategic framework when it comes to the enforcement part, running from 2021-2027, with key priority areas such as enforcement and emerging risks, traditional risks, new form of work, knowledge development, exchange and communication. It includes the way the working group are functioning, sort of a modus operandi, specific mandates for each working group, and a specific action plan for 2021-2023. And the very, very recent actions that SLIC has taken, as I mentioned already just a few weeks ago, a very important guidance document on to support labor inspectorates in addressing the quality of risk assessment and risk management measures related to SARS-CoV-2 was adopted, so by the working group BioLex that had prepared it. And then also revised new mandates for the working group on general enforcement aspects to include a Vision Zero approach to work-related deaths. So this is also a way to promote the Vision Zero, which is part of the strategic framework and will also be incorporated in the next SLIC campaign 2023-2024, Accidents at Work. There was also a revision of the mandate for the working group on emerging risks to address circulatory diseases such as heart disease or stroke. And then, of course, the action plan was also modified accordingly. So this is what I wanted to mention to you from the EU level. And of course, if you have questions about this area, I will be very pleased to reply to them, Michael, I think after the other presentations. Yes, thank you a lot.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for presenting us the EU strategic framework for 2021-2027 and its three key objectives, as well as the Senior Labor Inspectors Committee structure work plan for following years and recent actions. And now I would like to invite the President of the International Association of Labor Inspection, Mr. Ho Seong-hin, who will introduce presentation titled Framework for Measurement of Performance of OSHA Inspection. Seong-hin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. First, good morning to everyone here. I would like to thank the organizer, especially the director, for inviting me to share even at the introduction, yesterday opening, as well as today. When I was looking at what should I speak in this event, because I know all of you are expert, and we as an organization of International Association of Labour Inspection, we can only talk about general things. And like yesterday, I learned so much from you all about the details of how it is to be done. But after thinking through it, I thought there's a tool that IALI has about measuring performance of occupational safety and health function. Because it's important that while we have a lot of initiative, we have a lot of programs, it is also important to make sure that you are able to measure it, to make sure that they're effective and achieve the outcome that it was designed to achieve. So today's topic will be on that. Now first, let me give a quick introduction about IALI, although I spoke some of it. IALI stands for International Association of Labour Inspection, first established in 1972. As I say, we are now 50 years. So this year we are celebrating our 50 years anniversary, and there's quite a number of programs being planned. And today's event, participation in today's event is also part of it, right? As a global association for labour inspection with 100 over network members, we work to promote professional, ethical, and effective labour inspection. We support our members in terms of capability building and tackle labour inspection challenges as well. One thing I want to emphasize is that under our statute, IALI is a non-governmental international consultative organization conferred to IALI in 1978 by the ILO. So in other words, we do a lot of consultation with the various stakeholders, including ILO. Now, the day-to-day running of the association is entrusted upon our executive committee, and these are elected once every 3 years in the General Assembly. We have one president, 8 vice presidents. One of them will be performing the General Secretary, which is currently Australia, and the other one will be the Association Treasurer, which is currently from Switzerland. Now, as you know, labour inspectors cover quite a lot of functions, right? And one of the aim of the IALI is the main focus is occupational safety and health. And we investigate, our labour inspector investigate accidents and also look at work injury compensation. And the other aspect will be like under the Employment Act, where we cover incomes level, working hours, fundamental rights, investigate employment matters. So these are some of the various functions labour inspector covers. But IALI main focus is still occupational safety and health, although we do extend to others. For example, recently we issued a paper that's been in discussion, in circulation, about the role of labour inspection with respect to migrant workforce, right? The activities of IALI, we provide a professional foundation for building strong and modernized and effective labour inspection worldwide by influencing different organizations, by talking to them, by sharing. We help to build partnerships and alliances. One of IALI's strengths is that we have a number of alliances built up all over globally, and we work in close partnership with them. And through the alliances, we ensure that we learn from each other and also help each other from there. One example will be, like in my area, we have the ASEAN. ASEAN stands for the Association of Southeast Asia Nations. We have 10 countries, and the OSHA network there, all the 10 countries directors meet regularly once a year, and IALI participate in them every occasion, because we get the value out from also learning from other international practices. Now, we issue a lot of guidelines, right, over the years, and for example, some of the guidelines are the Global Code of Integrity for Labour Inspection, the International Common Principle for Labour Inspection, and another one is the measuring performance of the OSHA function. And this is my topic today, my main focus today for presentation. And it's a handbook that was published quite some time ago, and it's a little bit outdated, no doubt, but I thought the principle is still the same. But we are in the moment trying to update it as well to make it more relevant. Now, in terms of measuring performance of occupational safety and health, it's talking about how are we doing in terms of this labour inspection, and do we have in place the necessary legal framework, whether the inspectors have the necessary powers to do their work, It may sound a bit simple, but we do come across a lot of countries that inspectors has no power at all to even to go into a workplace unannounced, right? We hear, for example, in a country like Myanmar, the inspector go down to a workplace and want to talk to them. The employer say, come into the room, close the door, right? Put a gun on the table, let's talk. These are some of the feedback we get, and we help to talk to them and what sort of legal framework they should have and the powers they have. And requisite organization and individual competency, effective strategy, as well as tools that can be used to effect the strategies. Now, this handbook is about how to measure the results, especially the outcome of the performance of Labour Inspectorate. It's designed to help our members to meet the challenges of choosing the right things to measure to get the right result. Testing the performance measurement framework and demonstrating how why change happens. Obviously, when we put in place strategy and program, we want to make changes. By measuring this, we'll see why the changes happen. And that is especially in the area of improving the lives of workers. So it's specifically designed to be simple and user-friendly so that everyone can look at it and understand how to use it. Apply measurement concepts to Labour Inspectorates that are more public in nature and not like the private sector that look at the bottom line, right? And include learning from IALI's members countries as well. Okay. An overview of the methodology, there are 6 steps to this measurement. First is to analyze the OSH situation. You need to know where is your benchmark, where is your level, and define your goals to be achieved, what you want to hope to achieve with this program or initiative, right? And then you look at what are the inputs or resources that you have to be able to effect these goals. And then you proceed to undertake this and measure the outputs as well as the outcome. Now, this methodology look at the issue of efficiency, right, which is looking at the outputs, how well you get the output out with the type of inputs that you have, right? But as well as, more importantly, the effectiveness, right? There's no point having a very efficient system, but it's not effective in delivering the outcome that you design it for. So that's the overall methodology. I will dive a bit deeper into each step to give you a flavor of it, right? I've covered this thing in this where we talk about defining the problem, the goal statement, what are the inputs like budget and staff strength, what are the activities, the amount of activity undertaken by Labour Inspectorate, that's the output, and finally the outcome, the degree of change against the defined problem. So in step 1, in terms of defining the problem, we are looking at what is the issue the Labour Inspectorate needs to address. What are you trying to address? What has to change so OSH can improve? So you ask that question ourselves when we define the problem. An example would be, how do we increase certain type of injuries, such as there is an increase in certain types of injuries, such as MSD, and the rise of injuries in certain sectors, such as construction. So if this is an issue that you want to address, so how do you define that problem? And how do you establish a baseline, you know where you are, so that when you improve or you make change, you can see the improvement. In step 2, you establish a goal. And this goal is linked not only to what you want to achieve, as well as how do you align it to the overall national goal of having improving lives of people, for example, right? In step 3, we proceed to look at allocating our resources, right? And we all know that sometimes resources is hard to get. And these resources will include the staff strength, the size of Labour Inspectorate, the entire staff strength, including administrative staff, IT staff, etc., and also the budget of Labour Inspectorate. Yesterday, over a session, we were discussing about how does Labour Inspectorate get resources. And usually it's when there's some disaster that happened, unfortunately, right? But we do want to make improvement and make sure that things happen without necessary for a disaster. In step 4, then we undertake the activities, where the activities are developed to fulfill the Labour Inspectorate's statutory obligation. And how do we make the activities relevant, understandable, as well as able to control and accurate and timely? And one of the areas that we look at as part of the activities, I think most of you will agree, were the risk assessment or the risk-based targeting of activities, where these are some of the best practices everyone's looking at. In step 5, of course, we measure the outputs, and the outputs are the traditional way of measuring how we are acting on our service, our labor inspectors, and for example, the number of inspection, the number of charges, right, the number of prosecution, partnership, and publication, and so on, right? And this is a repeat of that. And more importantly, as I say, final measurement is measuring the outcome. That's the degree of change against a defined problem that we have identified as a result of labor inspectorate activities. And the outcome is the measurement of the impact of the output that we have put when we deliver the activities. The outcome statement should be related to well-defined goals and quantitatively measurable. So this is the part that we look at more on the outcome, right? Let me share with you an example. I'm using Singapore's example because I'm more familiar with it and easier for me to articulate it. In this handbook, there are a lot of other examples from other countries as well. Later, I'll show you what other countries. For example, back in 2004, 2005, Singapore faced a lot of issues, especially in terms of the number of high-profile accidents, right? And at that time, we believed that if it continued with the current programs, back in 2004, we have lots of programs, a lot of inspection, a lot of outputs, you know, and if we continue, even we make paradigm shift to the current regulatory regime, we do not expect significant improvement. There will be some improvement, but we don't think the improvement will be made. For example, at that time, we have 4.9 fatalities per 100,000 employees. And then when we check with the EU status, average at that time was 2.5. So it's half of what we have, right? So that was problem number one. Second problem was at that time, the public reaction to the 3 major accidents in 2004, where there's a whole highway that collapsed, killing 4 workers. There was a building under construction called Fusion Polish, where there was a massive collapse of all the reinforcement structure, right, causing nearly quite a number of injuries, but fortunately not too many there. And also the fire on board an oil tanker, right, demonstrated the public expects higher standards of safety. So when this confluence of activities, this disaster happened, there was a public uproar about it, and the loss of confidence in the nation to be able to manage safety and health of our workers. So this is the second problem we identified. The third problem was our traditional enforcement activities focus on detection of on-site non-compliance, but less effective on detecting systemic weaknesses. In other words, we just look at the offense, we fine, and that's it. That was at that time, right? But do not go further into see how these circumstances led to this non-compliance. And this is the part that we look at as a third problem. So we proceed to look at it, and then we say we set our goal, right? Our Singapore vision is to have a great workforce and great workplace. For us, we want a safe and healthy workplace for everyone, and we hope that the country will be renowned for our best practices in WSH as well. For our baseline on the onset, we say that our target, that was in mid-2005. We say in 10 years, we want to halve it to 2.5, right? And to attain the standards of developed countries with good safety records. That's the EU countries at that time, right? But in 2008, this target was reviewed with the long-term goal of us to reduce the workplace fatality to less than 1.8 per 100,000. Because by then, in 2000, we started in 2005, we set a target to 2.5. In 2008, we already achieved at 2.9. And the Prime Minister himself came up in a speech and says that your 2.9 is too easy. 2.9 and 2.5 is too close and it's too easy to achieve. He set us a even stretched target, 1.8. So that's how it was done, right? One thing we're fortunate is that we have a Prime Minister that's very passionate about trying to improve the lives of workers. And every fatality, he does question why is this happening, right? So we begin to look at allocating resources. The number of employees in our division increased gradually from 200 to 370. Yes, quite a significant increase by our standard, right? This includes our OSH inspector and operational program. We increased our budget to 40 million annually, and we work through partnership and alliances. We strengthen this partnership program together with our tripartite partners, the employers, the unions, as well as the academicians as well, right? Together with the WSH professionals as well as specialists. We strengthen that a lot by setting up a workplace safety and health council run by the industry. We supported this whole council. In step 4, we look at all the activities that we want to put in place through this program. We have a program-based engagement, right? We have put businesses under surveillance, and these are businesses with high fatality.
Welcome back after a short, unexpected break. But when I look at the faces of my colleagues gathered in Wrocław, I think that everybody likes such unexpected moments. So let's start again. Seong-Hin, you can continue if you are ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you, Mikael. Yeah, my apology for that interruption. As Mikael said, it's a welcome interruption. We were at this slide that triggered the outage. Right, we are looking at some of strategic intervention, which is the program-based engagement, business under surveillance, sectoral strategies as well. And we have other programs like targeting at SMEs, right? And we also earlier highlighted that we were not targeting at systemic weaknesses. So we put in place programs that focus on identifying systemic lapses that can potentially cause more accidents, right? And share with industry the learning points as well, right? We share it readily, and so develop industry capabilities to identify them. Sometimes you need not be the labor inspectors that are able to do it. We want the safety professionals out there, and they themselves must be able to do it. In terms of outreach, we look at engagement of the public to spot and report unsafe acts, right? We have apps that allow all the public to take a photograph and send it straight to us. because snap at mum, right? And leverage on the private sector capabilities where to appropriate supplement our enforcement efforts, because enforcement alone by us will not be able to achieve the outcome that we want. So in step 5, of course, we measure the outputs, the number of inspection, number of fines. That's a traditional way to sort of looking at how much work we are doing. But is that the one that we are looking at? No, we are looking at more the outcome. So by 2010, right, our fatalities rate has reached 2.2. And this is way surpassed the 2.5 that we earlier set up, but it's going towards the target of 1.8 by 2018, right? And the next slide will show by now, right, in 2021, we actually achieved 1.1. Back in 2018, we already way below that. It's around 1.2 already, okay? Now, I use this to plot against the GDP per capita income, more to show that a lot of people say that good safety and health outcome, right? Low injury rate can cost money, and it's no good for productivity. There's a lot of feedback from the industry. We used to say more stringent enforcement will cause a lot of loss in productivity. Although we say the productivity, which is in a way a measurement of per capita income, there are other factors involved. But good safety and health doesn't mean will impact on the productivity of our workers as well. So this is just a slide to illustrate that. Now, there are other case studies in the guidebook, as I say, right? We have a case study from Australia, Austria, Canada, Denmark, Lithuania, Netherlands, Norway, Slovenia, as well as United Kingdom. These were all case study was sort of submitted to IALI for us to publish inside there. As I said, we are now reviewing it, revising it to update the information in there. I would like to share with you another product that IALI has, what we call International Benchmarking of OSHA Regulation, or IBOR in short. There are two documents. There's a main document to talk about it and the scoring checklist that we provide. Now, this eyeball review process is basically looking at the entire system that on OSH issue, right? Whether the regulatory system is there, whether you have a communication with stakeholders, what are the planning and monitoring, and some of the desirable features. And this allow members who want to benchmark their OSH regulatory framework to an international benchmark can approach us, and we can send in technical advisors, technical consultants to go in there to do this review itself. We developed this back in 2019 and tested out in one of the countries, Malaysia, and then we wanted to roll out to other countries, but 2020 came. There were a few applicants, but 2020 came, we are unable to dispatch people to that country because of COVID. So we are now trying to revise the program for now. So this benefit of our eyeball is that basically it's a structured way to build up capability of labor inspectorates in a progressive manner. The idea is not looking at where are your how bad you are compared to other countries, but it's to compare with yourself. Where are the areas of strength and where are the areas of weakness or areas that you can want to close the gap? You will enhance professionalism and recognition of labor inspectorate system internationally. It will provide assurance to government or investors and businesses that you have some form of a system that's in place, and you are also looking at some of the weaknesses or gaps you want to cover. This product was developed because quite a lot of members country came to IALI and approached us to say, how can we help to send technical advisor over there to check on their system and where are the areas they can improve. But we never had a tool until back in 2019 when we developed this tool, right? And other activities of IALI, we look at various things like support countries in implementation of this code of integrity. Another area is the labor inspection competency framework, which has been developed by IALI, and it's a very generic one to allow countries to adopt it if they want to. And of course, we have regional alliances and working in close collaboration with other partners as well. And other collaboration with our international networks include, we work closely with International Labour Organization, as, like the Vision Zero Fund, right? When they want to develop certain program for other countries, we may collaborate with them. We are part of the Global Coalition for OSH, and we review guidelines, guidance papers that people want, and we also send technical expertise for developing nations, right? Like in Myanmar, they were developing their regulations for OSH, and we are asked to provide technical assistance to comment and to look at their legislation, what areas they want to. And these are some of the work that we did. We also Vision Zero campaign participate in the Vision Zero campaign by the International Social Security Association, which Hermit is here, and we work closely with him as well as other organizations within ISSA. We're also part of G20 OSH Network Initiative, and we are in this initiative, we are developing two guidance paper product, and one is a role of labor inspection in Vision Zero, which myself and Hermit and other people are part of this working group to see how labor inspector can be part of this Vision Zero campaign, because sometimes when we, as labor inspector, we just do enforcement. But Vision Zero is a way to influence, to change the culture, and how does labor inspector has that role to play inside there. And we also look at labor inspectorates on workplace violence and harassment as well. And this is a paper being developed, and we hope to have it endorsed in our next General Assembly. So these are something that we work closely with our international partners. So on that note, I would like to thank you for your attention, and my apology for the interruption as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for presenting us IALI activities, especially a handbook titled Measuring Performance of the Occupational Safety and Health Function, describing how to plan, how to organize, and how to measure the results of labor inspectorates activities in the relation to occupational safety and health. The next speaker wasn't able to join us in person, although nowadays it is not an obstacle to participate in the conference, fortunately. So the third presentation of the session is titled ILO Technical Guidelines on General Principles of Labor Inspection, and will be presented by Mr. Joaquim Pintado Nunes, Chief of the Labor Administration, Labor Inspection and Occupational Safety and Health Governance and Tripartism Department in International Labor Organization. Joachim, the floor is yours.
Well, and let me start by saying that I would really love to be there with you all today. I have many friends there, many colleagues, but we are starting our governing body next week, and one of the very important decisions that will be made is on the follow-up to the ILC resolution that made OSHA a fundamental principle in right at work. And unfortunately, I had to stay here, over the last days for a consultation process with our constituents preparing for the governing body next week. So just, a very brief justification on the reason why I could not attend the event today. The objective of my presentation will be to very briefly let you know of the recently adopted guidelines on general principles of lab inspection. And I think it's very important to refer to this instrument for many different reasons. Well, first of all, because these are the first guidelines of the ILO on lab inspection. They complement the provisions of Convention number 81 and number 129, and in a way they also update these provisions. As you know, the most recent instrument we have on lab inspection dates already from 1969, and of course, lab inspectorates in the context, in which lab inspectors operate has evolved a lot since then. Also, it's very important, and I do invite you all to read the guidelines if you still didn't have the chance to do so, because although being a non-binding instrument for all of our member states, this will be the instrument that will guide all the action of the ILO in the future in the area of lab inspection. And it will also guide the interpretation of our supervisory bodies on the application of Convention number 81 and 129 by our member states. So again, I'll try to highlight as much as possible what I think are the most important provisions of these guidelines. I know that many of you are attending the international forum that we are co-organizing with the Ministry of Labor and Social Economy of Spain next 17th and 18th of November in Valencia, Spain. And so I do hope to see many of you there. We'll have 1 day and a half, to fully discuss the content of the guidelines and also discuss challenges and good practices in terms of implementing the provisions of this instrument. So I would ask you to move to the next slide, please. And I want it will not take too much, my presentation, because when preparing for today's session, I started thinking of what are the current challenges, or the most recurrent challenges for lab inspectorates nowadays. And I went back to a presentation I did 5 years ago, also on challenges of lab inspection, and I realized that the challenges are not that different. They have probably some of them accelerated in pace, and of course that the COVID-19 pandemic, was a kind of a disruptive force, but also a kind of an accelerator of change that led us to, let us say, focus more on all that has to do, of course, to the use of digital technologies, telework, a very special accent or focus also on mental health issues, and of course that the attention of lab inspectorates has been driven very much in a way to respond to not new challenges, but the new ways, in which these challenges express themselves. So moving to the next slide, I'd like to make the bridge then to the guidelines. So what the guidelines intend to do is to enable lab inspectorates now in the 21st century to tackle all the challenges that are the typical challenges of the modern world of work. And it's also for this that you'll find on the guidelines not only provisions that specify the provisions of ILO conventions on labor inspection, but also innovate, because you'll find, for example, a chapter on policy and planning, and this reference is completely absent from ILO's conventions and recommendations on labor inspection. You'll find also many references to the use of technology. You'll find many references also to the way that inspectors or inspectorates should prepare and conduct inspection visits, which go much further in detail than what we find in the standards. If you could move to the next slide, please. Okay, very good. The guidelines, they were adopted by the governing body of the ILO in March this year, so they are quite recent, but this is the outcome of a process that took around 2 years, that went through a very large process of consultation with many inspectors, attending the meeting today, with IALI, and many other partners. And what I would like to highlight here is that, well, they were adopted by the ILO's governing body, and this means that they're adopted by governments, employers, and workers' organizations. And in terms of legitimation of this instrument, this is quite important, because it means that ILO member states, not only the governments, well, ILO members, not only the governments, but also the employers and the workers' organizations have endorsed the content of the guidelines. And this makes it a very powerful policy instrument for labor inspectorates to defend, in a way, their interests in terms of, continuing to strengthen, their institutions. Also important to say that the guidelines also look back not only to Conventions 81 and 129, but also to all the recommendations of the ILO, namely recommendation number 20, dating already from 1923. That was quite progressive for the time, and they also incorporate many of the provisions that we had on this recommendation that will be considered now as outdated next year by the International Labour Conference. Please move to the next slide. As I would like to start then to give you then a very brief overview, as I just said, on the content of the guidelines. And the guidelines are structured in 6 different chapters. They follow more or less the outline of Convention number 81. The first chapter covers the scope and functions of the labor inspection system. Then we have a chapter on structure and organization of national systems, a chapter on policy and planning, status and careers of labor inspectors, powers and methods of inspection, and a very last chapter on enforcement measures. Looking into the first chapter, and this you'll find it on the next slide, please. You will see that what the guidelines say, and again, no novelty here because this is already affirmed by ILO conventions on labor inspection, is that the mandate of labor inspection, the national system of labor inspection is universal. So it should cover all workers in all sectors. It should apply equally to the private and to the public sector. Again, taking into account national circumstances, rural and urban areas, and also to workers in the formal and the informal economy. The guidelines also stress that when we refer to laws and regulations or legal provisions, we intend to refer to laws and regulations, arbitration awards, and also collective agreements to the extent that these are enforceable by labor inspectorates. And this is the case in many of our member states, where indeed labor inspectorates do enforce the normative provisions of collective agreements. Moving to the next slide, I would like to also highlight some items on the scope and functions of labor inspectors. First of all, of course, the guidelines reaffirm what are the main duties of labor inspectorates, again, as per Convention 81 and 129, being this, of course, information and provision of technical advice to employers, workers, and their organizations on applicable legal provisions, the enforcement of legislation, and, of course, also the identification of gaps and bottlenecks in laws and regulations that need to be informed to the appropriate authorities so that, adequate action, may be undertaken to address those gaps or bottlenecks. There is a very special and important reaffirmation of what we find in recommendation 81, which is the fact that lab inspectors should not be involved in formal conciliation, arbitration, or adjudication of individual disputes. And it's important to stress this because this might not be the case for most of the EU member states, but it is the case for many of the ILO member states, where inspectors, as a matter of fact, spend most of their time dealing with conciliation, mediation of individual disputes rather than conducting inspection. You will also find references there, of course, that again, in line with the ILO conventions on lab inspection, that the lab inspection system covers all aspects of labor legislation. As we just heard from IALI's, the system of lab inspection should cover occupational safety and health, the nature of the employment relationship, working hours, wages, fundamental principles and rights at work, etc., etc., etc. Of course, to be adapted to the national legal framework and administrative practice. You will also find references there to the importance of using ICT to improve the work of lab inspectorates, to expand the range of operation, the reach out of lab inspectorates, in a way also to be able to work again with all sectors, with all groups of workers, including our informal economy, and also that the use of technology should also help to reduce the administrative burden for companies. I would like to highlight, before moving to the next slide, also one of the provisions of this chapter, which is the fact that the preventive control as affirmed by the guidelines, the preventive control of new establishments, plants, substances, and processes should be reserved for cases that involve serious risk, and only for these cases. In a way, again, not to distract lab inspectors from their main functions as defined by C81 and C129. Again, information, enforcement, and identification of gaps in legislation. Chapter number 2, that we already see on the screen, deals with the structure and organization of national systems of lab inspection. And moving to the next slide, you will see that, not in details there, but I'm going to complement it now, that what the guidelines do let us know on this chapter is that lab inspection systems do not operate in a vacuum. They are part of the larger system of labor administration. It is also said, and again, of course, in line with C81 and C129, that the national system should function under the supervision and control of a central authority so far as compatible with the administrative practice of the country. The guidelines go a bit further than what we find in ILO conventions because they define what is the national system of lab inspection. And they identify the system as comprising the applicable legal framework, the organization, the structure, the procedures, the methods of work, the staff, and the resources of all the organizations that undertake functions of lab inspection in the country. And again, as you know, systems are quite diverse, with countries with a single lab inspectorate, with countries with several lab inspectorates. And again, the ILO does not defend or does not promote one system, in favor of the other. But what we say is that there should be a strong central authority, namely, as again highlighted by the guidelines, to facilitate the formulation and the application of a consistent labor inspection policy and an overall strategy for the whole of the national territory. And this should be done in consultation with social partners. You will also find references on the guidelines that we needed to reaffirm that there's many types of private compliance initiatives out there. And these are quite important as they complement the role of lab inspectorates, but they do not replace and they cannot replace what is or what should be an independent public prerogative, which is lab inspection. And this is quite important to stress, as again, not necessarily the case in EU member states, But in many countries, we have seen that lab inspectorates are losing their relevance because they tend to be weaker in their intervention than some self-regulation practices. So moving to the next slide, we would focus now on the chapter on policy planning and monitoring. Again, as I just said 2 minutes ago, this is completely new to the ILO because you will not find many references to policy and planning on, ILO conventions applicable to lab inspection. So what's important there to say is that, well, first of all, the guidelines do refer to the need of involving social partners on the formulation of the national lab inspection policy, but also on the formulation of strategies and plans. The guidelines do recommend a minimum content for the national lab inspection policy. Again, for example, the policy should identify what are the principal and the additional duties of lab inspectorates. It should have provisions to ensure that the working time of lab inspectorates is used to do inspection and not for other functions. It should also include the criteria for the frequency of visits, identify procedures for applicable to special visits to investigate particular types of complaints, procedures for follow-up visits, also affirm in the policy that there is a need for individual and annual lab inspection reports. And again, you will see in other parts of the guidelines that it is highly recommended that after each inspection visit, there will be a complete inspection report, which would state the facts, of course, the findings of that inspection visit. And also, I'm not going through all the minimum recommended content for the policy, and I do invite you to read the guidelines on this particular point. You will see again, and I think that we're not seeing the right slide. If you could please move to the next one. There you go. You will see also some provisions, some paragraphs dedicated to planning on the guidelines. Again, the ILO reaffirms once again that there needs to be a proper balance between reactive and proactive inspection, and also a quite good number of paragraphs dedicated to programming and to the need of establishing, annual plans of work that should also be aligned, of course, with the performance measures, applicable to the staff working in lab inspectorates. Something that we have in recommendation number 20 that didn't pass when discussing and adopting Convention 81 and 129, but which is of particular importance, is the fact that the guidelines say, and this is, I'm even going to say the number of the paragraph because it's really relevant. Paragraph 3.4.6 says that the reports drawn by lab inspectors shall be considered to establish the facts stated therein in accordance with national legislation. And again, this is a principle that we do see in many of the national frameworks applicable to lab inspectorates in our member states, but less and less. So again, our recommendation is that member states do include as part of their legislation this important provision that, of course, strengthens the relevance, the legal relevance of the reports drafted by the lab inspectors. Moving to the next slide and the chapter on lab inspectors' status and careers. And again, the next slide, please. You will find, or what I maybe emphasize here, is that you will find there some specifications on what does it mean to be independent, impartial. And here we wanted to address a question that is we receive quite often from member states, from lab inspectors unions and associations, which is the fact of responding to what does it mean, the discretion of a lab inspector, and does the discretion mean that the lab inspector does not have to follow any kind of guidance established by the central authority or by the hierarchy. No, this is not the case. So, and again, a very important provision of the guidelines. This is paragraph number 417, and I'm going to read it because again, it's very important for many of the lab inspectors, I think, out there. Is that the non-politicization and independency of lab inspection is about ensuring technical and functional autonomy in decision making. And it further says, this is perfectly compatible with the respect and observance of instructions, circulars, standard operational procedures, and technical criteria used by the hierarchy. And again, I know that this is a question faced by many administrations in many countries, and I do think that this specific provision of the guidelines will help to address these questions. Again, you'll find several references to the fact that the recruitment of lab inspectors should be based exclusively on education and expertise. You will also find references to the fact that, well, the associated experts and specialists to the work of the lab inspectorates, well, it is recommended that these specialists are, as far as possible, employed by the lab inspectorate and not being external specialists. And also, again, reaffirming the principles of Convention 81 and 129, that the stability of employment of lab inspectors is best secured if lab inspectors are civil servants appointed on a permanent basis. And again, my friends, this is a problem. It's not a challenge, it's a problem that we see in many countries out there. Probably not the case for most of the inspectors present in the room today. Moving to the next slide, also just a very brief reference to the provisions on training in ethics that you'll find on the guidelines. Again, the guidelines do recommend, no novelty there, that lab inspectors receive initially in lifelong training. That would be a mix of theoretical and practical. You will also find references to the fact that it is possible to establish a probation period for lab inspectors, and this is the case for many countries. In terms of occupational ethics, I would probably focus on detachment, as the guidelines go a bit further than what you find in the conventions when it defines what do we understand by detachment. If you read the guidelines, you will see that detachment should include the prohibition not only of material and financial advantages, but also personal interests of psychological, emotional, or political nature that are likely to exert undue influence on the work of the inspectorates. Just one example, again, you will have further details on what does it mean, the professional secrecy, the confidentiality. For example, on confidentiality, the guidelines recommend that this extends to all the staff of lab inspectorates and not only to lab inspectors. So it goes also a bit further than what you find on the conventions, and of course provisions on gender equality, the need of having a system, a performance appraisal of the work of inspectors and inspectorate staff, and also the need to develop policies and mechanisms to protect inspectors against violence. Moving to chapter number 5 on the powers and methods of inspection. The next slide, please. And still the next. The next, please. When you, for those of you that have read, yes, for those of you that have read the guidelines already, and for those of you that will read them, you may ask yourselves, why are the guidelines repeating what we have in the conventions on the supervisory powers of lab inspectorates? Well, because this is very important. We see a growing number of violations of Convention 81 and 129 out there, and again, the guidelines do reaffirm that what we have as authority prerogatives of lab inspectors in the conventions are there to stay and should be reaffirmed by national policy and law. You will also see references here, once again, to, and I'm not going through this in detail, because this happens,
number 15.
in several chapters. I'm almost finishing. reference to the importance of using technology for the work of inspectorates. Again, a reaffirmation of the principle that all lab inspection visits, it would be the previous slide, please, but doesn't matter. All inspection visits should be yes, in the yes, should be announced. You will find also provision recommending what would be the requirements and the background information that inspectors should prepare before undertaking a visit. Also, a reference to the fact that visits should not be limited by the use of checklists, and of course that union workers representatives are to be involved when conducting the inspection visit, that this should not in any way interfere with the impartiality and independence of the lab inspector. The last chapter now, chapter number 6, and the next slide, please. And still the next. Again, as I know that I don't have much time, just a reference to the fact that, again, the ILO does not recommend any given system of sanctions, criminal, administrative. We do say in the guidelines that sometimes, and for some time of violations, a system of administrative penalties may be more expeditious than criminal sanctions. You will also find there a reference which is very important when it comes to appealing against prohibition notices. And what the guidelines say very clearly is that appeals against prohibition notices should not have a suspensive effect. Of course, because this would lead potentially to a negative outcome, in terms of what we expect to have as a result when a lab inspector, suspends, stops a given operation, which is, the protection of life and health of a worker or a group of workers. Also, a very important reference here is that, and again, a question that we receive quite often from member states, is that notices for improvement and sanctions can both run in parallel. Again, attention being given to the national legal frameworks. The last slide now, the next one, please, which corresponds to also to the last provisions of the guidelines. They do refer to the sanctions. Again, there is a very specific reference to the principle of discretion of lab inspectors to initiate or not a sanctioning procedure, but again, it says that there should be a guarantee of consistency of decisions among lab inspectors, which in turn will increase the perceived credibility of the lab inspector, meaning that, yes, this is a principle enshrined by Convention 81 and 129, but once again, the national authority should establish criteria on how inspectors should or not decide on an enforcement measure rather than providing information or advice to a given employer. So again, my last reference to the guidelines is exactly the last paragraph of this instrument that refers to cross-border enforcement. Again, more and more important nowadays with the global mobility that we know that we have out there. And it just provides examples of how lab inspectorates can, closely cooperate in terms of addressing, the global or the cross-border dimension of compliance. So I'll stop here. I hope to see many of you on the event organized on the 17th and 18th of November in Spain, and we'll have much more time then to go further in detail to the content of the guidelines. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Thank you for presenting us recommendations from International Labour Organization described in ILO technical guidelines on general principles of labor inspection. All issues described in the document you have presented are of special importance for appropriate addressing of challenges related to occupational safety and health. I also hope that you will find a few minutes at 12 and join us during panel discussion. Now I would like to invite the project manager in Prevention and Research Unit of European Agency for Safety and Health at Work, Mr. Yanis Anifantis, who will introduce presentation titled The State Influence in OSHA Compliance, Challenges and Opportunities for Enforcement. Yanis, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Michael, for the kind introduction. Thank you, Chief Labor Inspector, for hosting this event, for the invitation, and all the hospitality. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yannis Anifantis. I work as project manager for EU-OSHA, the European Agency for Occupational Safety and Health. EU-OSHA is responsible for the collection, analysis, and dissemination of OSHA-related information across Europe in order to make European workplaces safer, healthier, and more productive, and for the benefit of everyone, businesses, employees, and governments as well. In order to achieve that, we are running a number of research projects and a number of additional activities. Currently, we are running an overview report in digitalization that is covering a lot of the issues that were discussed during this conference. Apart from that, we have the SNR survey that most of you already know, a survey collected in something like 50,000 enterprises across Europe that collect the new and emerging risks, as well as a number of issues of importance for enterprises across Europe. We have the OIRA, the online interactive risk assessment tool, in order to assist especially small and micro enterprises in conducting effective risk assessment, the OSWiki, and NAPO as well. This protagonist of these short films that present all these interesting topics in a nice way that is easy to understand for everyone. We are established in Bilbao, and naturally, just like occupational safety and health, we are a tripartite organization and collaborate closely with policymakers, employers' organizations, employees' organizations as well. Currently, as I said, we are running an overview study that was based on a foresight study that we conducted several years ago that is covering 5 major areas, and this is digitalization. And this is going to be actually the topic of our next campaign that will be launched next year, 2023. So the 5 main areas in which we are currently working, and a lot of work has already been published in our website about these areas, is first of all the use of artificial intelligence and advanced robotics for the automation of tasks, both cognitive and physical, algorithmic management for management of workers, platform work, telework, and also the use of digitalization and several systems, AI-based systems, that can actually monitor occupational safety and health and improve occupational safety and health. Just to mention at that point that before joining EU-OSHA for several years, I used to work as a labor inspector, so I can fully understand your concerns, as well as the main challenges of this occupation and the skills that labor inspectors should have, but also the importance of doing this work, because enforcing occupational safety and health at workplaces can actually improve work conditions, working life, and the society as a whole. And after all, as Freud has said, love and work are the cornerstones of humanness. So in order to try and address the issues and try to investigate the challenges and the new role of the labor inspectorates in the new changing world of work, since the world of work is changing a lot during the last few years due to digitalization, due to COVID. Just imagine that 15 years ago, multi-billion companies of today did not even exist. Several studies indicate that today 65% of the kids that are going to elementary school will do an occupation that doesn't exist actually today. So all these and the new and emerging risks are challenges that the labor inspectors should deal with. And in order to try and identify those, we should actually need to take a step back and identify the key aspects of regulation that are relative to occupational safety and health. So the first aspect is standard setting. That is to identify the problems, the values, the goals to be achieved by the regulatory system, and define actually the policies, the legislation, the rules, the procedures, the documentation. The second step is compliance promotion. And this includes all those activities that encourage actually compliance to legislation, first of all, with regulatory standards, improving, including also the provision of advices, education, and all these culture building kind of a thing that we have been discussing during today and yesterday as well. The third step includes monitoring that has to do with collection of data about actually the application of those standards and the responses of enterprises. And the last one is enforcement. Enforcement that has to do with alignment of the behavior by the imposing fines, sanctions, administrative fines as well to establishments in order to comply. So based on the ILO convention, the labor inspectorates have specific inspection powers, and they can affect each one of those 4 key factors. So they can actually be involved in setting the standards. They can collect information in order to have more targeted inspections based on collected data. They can force compliance, and also they can punish non-compliance. Back in the 80s, the model that used to apply was the typical command and control model. So it was only the labor inspectorate that had the monopoly over all these powers. And by that way, inspections and enforcement could improve compliance, I would say, not OSH performance, because sometimes, you know, compliance and actually OSH performance may be different in terms that compliance would mean, for example, and I believe that many of you have experienced that for an enterprise to have a risk assessment, but it's not only about having the risk assessment, it's how to conduct the risk assessment and actually how to make use of the risk assessment as a valuable tool. Because an enterprise may have a risk assessment just in a drawer to present to the labor inspector, but this doesn't mean much. So the new role that the labor inspector should have, and in order to address deficiencies of this old model, could include some actions that could actually increase flexibility, that is questioned the old model, effectiveness, the fact that the old model could also cause this kind of what we call regulatory resistance to enterprises, and also address all these complexities of today's business models in supply chains due to new forms of work, platform work, digitalization, and social life as well. So the new approach could include some economic instruments as well that have to do, for example, with reduction of taxes for enterprises that present good OSH performance. Also by other economic incentives, rules for allocating liability for harms. We have seen in the case of Dermer, for example, that it could be either the haulier or the platform that could be considered liable in case of violations. Building culture, what we call safety culture, it is not easy to actually to visit all enterprises at the national level, even in countries that are considered that are doing many inspections. So this percentage could have only one digit. So it is not easy to cover all enterprises around the year, every single year. So this kind of culture building and making the enterprises understand that it is of their benefit to invest in occupational safety and health, it is very important. Even though this is challenging as well, because as you all know, it is quite easy to persuade someone that, for example, investing this money to increase production could actually mean something for the enterprise, because the employer could see this actual increase in production, but investing of safety, it is a bit more challenging because the actual effects are not always obvious and easy for the employers to understand. Also, it could be the development of co-enforcement models, and I will present a couple of examples a bit later, and forms of self-regulations. In terms that we can see nowadays, big multinationals may implement ISO 45000 standards regarding safety based on other kind of incentives. Like, for example, the supply chain, or based on the needs of the clients. So there are several factors that can affect compliance, the real compliance, so improvement of occupational safety and health. And some of them can actually motivate and increase compliance, and the other can actually make enterprises not to comply. So the first is the expected benefits of non-compliance. Why do enterprises not comply to legislation? Because they think that there are specific benefits on that. What kind of benefits can those be? This could be more or less economical benefits, or they think that by that way they can speed up production, so deliver more goods to clients, to meet the deadline, and so on. How can we actually turn this situation around and promote compliance? Is the expected costs of non-compliance. So this could be, for example, making enterprise understand that actually safety pays off, or making enterprise understand that, you know, in case that you violate the law, there will be a sanction that will be imposed to you, or because of an accident. Because, as you know, people used to say that if you think that safety is expensive, then you should try an accident. Another could be the expected benefits of compliance, and this could include insurance discounts for accident-free operation, or even building a reputation of responsibility for the company. That is also very important during these days. And the last reason for non-compliance, you can see I have put these plus and minus signs in there, is the expected costs of compliance, using uncomfortable personal protective equipment, or the loss of time, and so on. Last year, it was in June, if I remember it well, we published, and this publication is available on our website, the overarching, as we call it, review report in supporting compliance. And there we identified several key factors and roles that actually can make a successful transition from legislation to compliance, because the legislation is there. The legislation can be considered by regulators, that could include everything. We can see today that even the framework directive that was issued back in 1989 can be used in order to address even risks related to digitalization. But the point is, how can effectively have this transition from legislation to compliance? So the main factors that actually can affect this transition, especially to micro and small enterprises, because micro and small enterprises employ the majority of workers in most European countries, but as well as large enterprises as well, is first of all the enforcement. That, as mentioned, is actually applied by the labor inspectorates. And through innovative approaches that can be used nowadays. The second could be also the preventive services that can play an effective role on that could support the labor inspectorate in their role. Business incentives could also be another. And it was identified that also in terms of the micro and small enterprises, the large enterprises could also play a significant role in supporting compliance through the supply chains, and that can actually positively influence occupational safety and health, as well as social reporting or societal norms, values, and peer group expectations. So all these are forces that can affect this model, and all these factors are explained in detail in this report that is publicly available on our website. So what are the challenges for regulators today? First of all, regulators should increase the efficiency and effectiveness of enforcement, but this has to be done in a way that it will actually reduce the administrative burdens of firms. So it is not like just putting barriers and having all these administrative issues. Labor inspectors, regulators should balance between this reduction of administrative burdens, but also improving of efficiency and effectiveness. Also, it is important to move away from this one-fits-all model. So we could tailor somehow the solution to specific firms in order to address the special needs. Furthermore, it is the labor inspectorate should be responsive to technologies, kinds of harms of different types of firms, and business arrangements. In terms that technology, of course, can create several challenges for labor inspectorates, but could also create new opportunities. The use of technology could also increase this effectiveness and could help the labor inspectorate to be more prepared. Since, as we have seen for the case of Finland, by running a survey and having these online tools, could help the labor inspectorates to collect more specific information for the specific firm in order to deal with this changing nature of risks and new and emerging risks like psychosocial risks. Furthermore, it is the partnership with state and non-state actors. That could be other authorities or the police, or probably the role of the social partners and so on. Also, it could be to adjust the proportion of proactive versus the reactive inspections and investigations, to better target regulatory resources, and this could also be assisted by the use of new technologies in order to collect all that information. We have also technologies like big data today, so we could identify meaningful partners in data that a few years ago didn't make any sense, and by that way the labor inspectorate could become more effective in targeting actually the right enterprises or setting their next campaign. There are also based on technology and due to the globalized economy today, there is significant difficulty sometimes in order to locate and to reach firms at workplaces. So it is not as straightforward as it used to be. A few years ago, the labor inspector could just knock the door of the enterprise and step in and conduct this kind of inspection regarding the most active threats, as we call them, bibliography. How there are a lot of more issues today to consider, and this kind of latent threats, organizational issues that have to do with supply chains, and the fact that there are non-working work arrangements. Of course, in some cases, and as mentioned for the case of Denmark, it is quite easy to go and deal with specific platforms, but in other cases, if the platform would operate in a country that is outside the EU, and through the platform, a programmer who is working and writing code from his home, he's working, it is not always easy to identify these types of work, this kind of work, in the new gig economy. And this situation also makes extremely difficult the unionization of workers, or feeling that they can be included in this kind of an organized team in order to address these issues. So nowadays there are some novel approaches at EU level, and digitalization could become actually the driver for this kind of approaches. So nowadays every single labor inspectorate has a website where all the information is provided, training material, and so on. Online interactive risk assessment tools, for example, are provided through these websites. But also, this kind of platforms could also be available there in order to report a specific situation for an enterprise. So it is much easier also for workers to reach the labor inspectorate. Also, it could provide training capabilities for labor inspectors, like the use of virtual reality in order to improve their competence, because of course new competences are also required for labor inspectors in order to deal with this situation. Or for example, new applications like drones could be applied for the case of inspecting something in offshore, for example, platform or wind turbine, in order to reduce the risks of the inspector, or at least making use of these kind of technologies in order to make the worker, the employers believe that, you know, the labor inspectorate is there. There are some drones available. It is not for sure that the drone that is flying is one from the labor inspectorate, but just knowing that, you know, the labor inspectorates actually use this kind of technologies could also become a preventive factor as well. And all these new technologies like artificial intelligence, AI, big data, that can further improve the effectiveness and the evaluation of inspections as well. Because it is not just to visit the workplace and conduct an inspection, but the inspection should have actually some value, should change something in the enterprise. And all these technologies were actually accelerated during the last 3 years due to the pandemic, because the pandemic created the need to actually make extra use of these kind of technologies, like telework. Most of us were teleworking during the pandemic, but also created the need in order to develop new methods of inspection. For example, in several countries, what we call virtual inspections actually were applied. That was something like contacting the enterprise in order to provide some photos, provide some data, the risk assessment, and so on. And nowadays, it looks that this kind of practice is still here after the pandemic. So some countries could create, for example, a platform where all the enterprises should actually upload the risk assessment in electronic form as a second measure in order to assess the quality and so on. Other innovative approaches that were used in the past were, for example, in the Netherlands, the OSHA catalogs that were developed in collaboration between the inspectorates and social partners. In Denmark, the orchestration. In Norway, nowadays they have, at least at sectoral level, what they call regional safety representatives, and also other co-enforcement schemes. So, some considerations and gaps about what is done, what can be done, and what do we need in order to further develop this kind of skill, competencies, and improve the role of the labor inspectorate, is that at the moment there is little evidence about the relative effectiveness of approaches. So even, for example, these kind of virtual inspections are conducted, there is no data on if these kind of approaches are actually effective. So we need to collect more data and conduct some research on that. Also, there is no standard methodology in order to assess occupational safety and health at the workplace level. Imagine an ideal world where every single enterprise would have a score in terms of occupational safety and health. And after the interventions, the visit by the labor inspector, we could measure that score again. Of course, this is quite theoretical, but we could start thinking of developing this kind of systems that could actually evaluate enterprises in terms of occupational safety and health, in order also to evaluate the effectiveness of the methods that are used by the labor inspectorate at the national level, of course. Also, the regulations or instructions on to conduct virtual inspections or sanctions are not there. So is it possible, just based on a photo, for example, that is provided, is sent to the labor inspectorate due to that virtual inspection, to impose fine? So the regulation is not clear at that point. So probably some improvement in regulations should also take place. Also, there should be this kind of balance always between persuasion and sanction. According to the old model, sanction was the only tool that the labor inspectors had in their hands. But nowadays, they could also promote this discussion, and they are the expert on the topic, and try to persuade actually to companies that occupational safety and health pays off. However, even today there is limited empirical evidence of what actually works and what should this balance should be. And furthermore, the range of measures to employ in building capacity and shaping motives for compliance. Additional factors that could be considered on that is the lack of resources that in many cases the labor inspectorate face, the new work arrangements, new technologies, new risks, and so on. So to that end, collaboration and coordination with social partners and with other entities and stakeholders could be essential. Also, there should be an enhancement in data collection. We need more data in order to better define the situation and be more proactive and have all these preventive interventions, and also assess the value of those interventions. New competencies and skills and training could be needed for the labor inspectors. I mean, the average labor inspector today is competent enough in order to deal, for example, with this kind of platform work. Is it easy to just enter the workplace and see some kind of automation to assess what kind of risks are associated with this kind of collaboration between the actual worker and a collaborative robot? What kind of psychosocial risks? How would it be to work all day with a machine? And we have seen this kind of anthropomorphic robots in a video yesterday that actually could create expectations. A worker could look at this machine, and because this machine has eyes, has ear, the worker expects that the machine actually can see and can listen. Is this true? We don't know always. So probably the machine is just designed this way in order to look better, but it cannot see or even cannot hear. So these are new kind of challenges and new kind of skills that labor inspectors would need in order to deal with these kind of situations. Because, as you all know, safety and health is a multidisciplinary scientific field, and it's not that only engineers are good at safety, only psychologists, only managers, only lawyers, and so on. So many different competencies should be combined in order for the labor inspector to be effective in exercising her or his role. New tools to assist targeting and effective inspections, effective collection and sharing of information. Before answering any question, by using the dialectic method, we should think about what should actually be the new role of the labor inspector, the labor inspectorate in the new and changing world of work. And thinking about that, I would just mention that technology, of course, could create several challenges, as we have seen, and the new role should be considered. But it is actually the use of technology. There is not good technology and bad technology. It is how people use the technology in order to improve work conditions, in order to improve their work life, in order to improve inspections. And currently, based on this overarching review report, we are running a number of additional studies in order to try to answer that question on the role of the labor inspectorates. Based on that overarching review report, two major strands were identified: the state influence in supporting compliance and the market influence. That is also very important. In the market influence, currently we are almost finalizing a project that has to do with the supply chains and the role of supply chains in agricultural sector and in construction sector that will be published by mid-2023. As with regards to the state influence, a couple of discussion papers have been published, and now we have just starting with our country-specific reports at a national level. We have, at the moment, and based on that overarching review report, identified Germany and Norway as good examples of countries that have to present this kind of innovative approaches, and also represent Central Europe and Nordic countries as well. In 2023, we intend to launch 3 additional national kind of studies covering countries in all geographical distributions. So we would have someone from the south, probably, someone from one country from the east. Let's see, probably one of the next countries could be Poland as well, who knows? In order to further collect the information and try to answer the previous questions. All the material is already publicly available in our website, as well as the overarching review report, that is very interesting document to read. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yanis. Thank you for presenting us recent activities of the Bilbao agency. And the last presentation of the 5th session is titled Implementing a Preventive Mindset in Industry by Vision Zero, an offer for labor inspectors to increase sustainable compliance, and will be presented by Mr. Helmut Eines, Chairman of the International Social Security Association Vision Zero Steering Committee. Helmut, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting ISSA, for inviting me to this very important conference. And thank you for the great hospitality. I already told my wife we must come back in spring to Wrocław, because it's really a great, beautiful city. I work for ISSA in several functions, but I just want to tell you that before I worked in the German social accident insurance scheme for close to 40 years as an inspector in the German dual system, and Yeah, and at the end I was the head of the prevention department for insurance supplier for chemical industry, mining, cement, so a lot of high-risk industries. And we introduced the Vision Zero concept, the Vision Zero strategy. I prefer strategy rather than campaign, as an umbrella strategy in this organization for 1.4 million workers in 34,000 enterprises after our merger. So it was our new umbrella for all activities in prevention. Yes, I will try to explain to you, to tell you the story of Vision Zero, and I think it is an offer for labor inspectors to increase impact. Maybe I should say to increase sustainable compliance and to promote this in the industry. Before coming to the topic, let me remind us to the work situation close to us here in Ukraine. And I just have one slide to tell you that together with the chairperson of the Association of OSHA Professionals of Ukraine, we founded this Help Alliance. And if you want to know more, or if you want to support us, then you can go to the website. Yeah, the Vision Zero story. Let me start with this slide, which shows the development of serious accidents in Germany, which have to be compensated over a long time, 100 years. And we started with technology, then we focused on organization. Now we are at people level. And if you look to this development, you may think it's good, the results are perfect, we are close to zero. But what is behind this figure? First of all, if I show this slide to employers, I tell them this is the social dimension. And I would like to show a short video from Singapore, which is, in my opinion, very impressive. Yeah, I think this is the message we have to send to the leaders and to the employers. Why to comply with the law? Because of that, yeah, that is the background, and this is it touches everybody who sees it always. So we heard already about the European figures. We know, I think all of you know, I can keep it short, what is the global balance in the world? 340 million accidents, probably 2.4 million people die because of diseases, because of exposures, and 400,000 fatal accidents. So, and this is happening every day. And we are not aware. A lot of people still think this is normal, where you have work, you have these cases, and you cannot prevent it. We only wake up when we have big disasters, then we make it to the media, to the news, like this disaster here in Soma, in the mining disaster 2014, 301 people, miners, died underground. And we have another disaster again. And there are politicians who say mining is risky. You must be aware that probably you cannot come home. So this is the situation. But there is a second background behind this charge, behind this point 3. This is the economical dimension. And how do we address it? So very often we have the question, does it pay to invest in prevention, or is it just a cost factor which we must minimize? And I like to show this kind of calculation or this kind of thinking to employers and to managers. This is a list of consequences of accidents and diseases, and I think it's not the final list. A lot of factors have to be put in the calculation we make, and very little employers do this kind of calculation. Let's assume we have a medium accident and the consequence is a cost of $50,000. And if the company has operating a profit margin of 5%, or you can do it with 10%, this company, this employer must create additional business, additional turnover of $1 million just to compensate the accident. So most of the employers are not aware about this kind of calculation. They think that was a good year. I made $1 million more. Yeah? But if they see the truth, it's different. So there is also a study of the ISSA that it pays to invest in prevention. We say globally the return of prevention is 2.2, so $1 investment, $1 feedback, or €1 or whatever. So this was our analysis in the ISSA, and we said we must think it new, in a new way. We must add something to our traditional ways of thinking safety, of thinking health, and of thinking well-being. And the result is the Vision Zero initiative, the Vision Zero strategy, and it is a global initiative for prevention culture. And what we see behind is we want to do something more than just to comply with the law. We want to come to a prevention culture in the industry. And the definition is, it's a prevention strategy for the new mindset, because we are convinced and we believe that every accident is preventable. Every accident has a cause, and therefore they can be prevented. The same is with the diseases, and there is a special focus on fatalities and on serious accidents and diseases. In short, everybody has the human right to return safe and healthy from his work back home every day. So this is the definition. We have 3 pillars of Vision Zero: safety, the classic pillar; health, in my opinion, the undervalued pillar. Remember the figures we have seen. And well-being is the new pillar by positive leadership, by a good communication culture, by a good, a non-blaming culture. So workers should feel good at workplaces and not bad, in short. Yeah, we have definitions. What do we understand on safety? I think I must not go in the details here. We have it for health. And well-being, in our opinion, is what we have connected to the mental health of the workers, and has a lot to do with the workplace design, with work organization, with human factors, and I would like to add with leadership. I think leaders are extremely important, how they do their leading performance. So, wherever we show this so far, they say, yes, that's the way. Yeah? We have to go, but what to do? What can we do in a different way? And I think we must do it with an emotional component. We must do it with our common sense. We must simplify it, what we did in the past, and yeah, keep it simple. And for that, we have the 7 golden rules. So we translated the legislation, which is sometimes very wide, many paragraphs, into 7 fields of action, 7 golden rules. And it starts with addressing what is the leader, what is the CEO, and every management level, what do? They get what they want. They have the key in the pocket, and they must use the key. Second, of course, is to be aware about the risks and hazards, looking back, analyze accidents and diseases, looking forward, risk assessment. If you know it, you can set up your program for every company, for every industry, define targets and do the right things. You need some organizational issues. This is number 4. You need to look at technology, of course, still in the catalog, to have a healthy technology in place and a safe one. And then we come back to people. We must train the people. We must improve the competence. So I think we must do more about instructing and do a proper training for the people. And number 7 is people again. You need a social dialogue. You must do it with the workers at the workplaces, and you cannot just give the rules and then say everything fine and well organized, but they don't behave what we expect. So this is not the solution. These are the 7 golden rules, and it is something different than the traditional OSH management systems, because we focus more on business excellence. In Vision Zero, safety and health is a value, a company value, and it is lived by all in the workplace. And workers are empowered. They are not part of the problem. They are part of the solution, just to illustrate a little bit what is the difference. Yeah, it's human-made. So this is, I think, the summary of Vision Zero. We are convinced, and we have a lot of examples, if you implement these 7 golden rules, you will be on a road which brings you on the way to prevention culture, and maybe you come closer and closer to this destination of Vision Zero. It is a concept every company can start. So it's not a concept just for the champions. They should start to walk this way. Yeah, we have a toolbox. There is a website. You find a lot of these tools on the website, all for free, all open source. We have the Vision Zero guide, and in this guide, it's the first and the central tool. It looks like that. For every of the 7 golden rules, there is 1 page of checkpoints, so about 100 points. You can use this as a self-assessment tool for enterprises. I think labor inspectors can use it to ask questions. And we have a very interesting experience. If you give it to the workers and to the managers, and you compare the answers, you will see what is the different perception the management thinks everything good, but it does not arrive at the workplaces. So it's a multi-tool. We have a new published last year, the proactive leading indicators. So now we can add to the lagging indicators, to the figures of accidents and diseases statistics, what we do in order to improve. And we have found out 14 leading indicators, 2 for every of the golden rules. It's also on the website. Yeah, this is a short look to the leading indicators. I think we don't have the time to go in the details. We offer training, and we think the training on Vision Zero is a training for the internal groups, internal stakeholders, but it can also be an offer for external stakeholders, because we should have all the same understanding. We should speak the same language. And yeah, sometimes companies ask how to start. The recommendation is to start with a workshop with the top management, to put it as a training for managers or for designated new managers. And we can also do some training for somebody who can coordinate the activities. What is the future? Last week, we published a new guideline to use the same concept also for the environmental impact of industry, because dust behind the fence is safety, is health, workplace health. Dust outside the fence of the company is environmental protection. So it's close together. And this has been developed by the European Association of Safety Professionals. Yeah, we can show that this is also a concept, a structure to handle new risk factors, and Corona is a very impressive new risk factors, but we don't need always a new concept, a new strategy. If we have something in place which works, we can adopt it to the new risk factors, and I think this is not the last risk factor. We are working on a tool with these leading indicators and the 7 golden rules to measure the quality along supply chains, because we think this is a very, and we heard it, yeah, a good way to create impact between big companies and small companies, to go back to the field and to the mine where the raw material come from. And yeah, we want to use this concept as well for this topic. I think we can publish it next year, and it is done, a project together with the Finnish Institute, FIO. So I hope we will get a good tool from this cooperation. Yeah, to come to an end, close soon. We have a lot of challenges. We can add, there is a longer list, yeah, what happens on our roads, public health, private life, environment, and more. And my message is, with the same concept, we can reduce confusion of society and people, and I think we can create a better world with this concept. It is a success story because it's quite simple. It's about people, emotional, attracts leaders and inspires people. We have some examples where even countries use it as a backbone of their strategic approach. And we are very happy that it's now in the European framework as an important component. Yeah, and at the end, what can be the role of labor inspectors in Vision Zero? I think I must not mention, but I have this slide here. There are the two functions of the labor inspection to secure enforcement. My feeling is we still talk a little bit too much only on enforcement. Therefore, I would recommend to have a look on this second paragraph to supply technical information and advice. And so for me, it's both, yeah. And therefore, we have started a project together with IALI to write a guideline for labor inspectors to explain and to offer what can be done with this Vision Zero concept as an additional approach wherever it fits. And the content will be like this: why this guide, what are the challenges, what is the role. We explain a little bit the tools, and then we have the central tool, I think, that can be a prevention culture quick check done by the inspector. And this is still under construction, but just to give you an example, we will offer 14 questions for the 7 elements, the 7 golden rules. And this will give a first picture, what's the level of culture in this respective industry. And I think we invite you all to contribute. We will circulate the drafts, and it should be our joint tool and our joint guideline. So thank you very much. And I think together we can work for a decent work in a global world. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helmut, for excellent presentation. Thank you for presenting us Vision Zero strategy, its pillars and 7 golden rules, as well as the idea of Vision Zero guide for labor inspectors. I hope that we will have time to talk about it during panel discussion after the break. So now I would like to invite all participants of the conference for a short break. We are coming back at 12. Welcome back. This is the last session of the second day of the conference. I have invited our today's speakers and the host of the event to the panel discussion concluding the session of day 2 titled Recommendations and Support from International Organizations and Institutions. I would like to present you once more participants of the panel forum. Mrs. Katarzyna Łażewska-Hrycko, Chief Labor Inspector in Poland, Mr. Ho Seong-hin, President of the International Association of Labor Inspection, Mr. Joaquim Pintado Nunes, Chief of the Labor Administration, Labor Inspection and Occupational Safety and Health, Governance and Tripartism Department in the International Labor Organization, and Mr. Helmut Eines, Chairman of the International Social Security Association Vision Zero Steering Committee. Well, I hope that Joachim is connected with us. Let's start the panel discussion with the issue of preparedness for labor inspectorate of labor inspectorates for present and future challenges. One of the 3 key objectives of the EU strategic framework on the health and safety at work 2021-2027 is focused on the issue. Today's presentation shows that it is easier for a labor inspectorate to face new phenomena in the world of labor if it fulfills international standards in scope of structure, organization, planning and monitoring of inspection activity, as well as labor inspectors' powers, methods of inspection and enforcement measures. That is leading me to the first question addressed to Joachim. Okay, Joachim is not yet with us, so let's come to the questions addressed to other experts of the panel session. Well, today's presentation showed that initiation, developing and disseminating international standards is one of the most important tasks of international organizations. IALI's measuring performance of the occupational safety and health function or international benchmarking on OSH regulation are excellent examples of such standards. That is why I would like to address the question to Seong-Hin. You have mentioned in your presentation over a dozen countries that have implemented standards developed by IALI. What are the most important benefits reported after practical implementations of the standards? I also wonder if there are any other standards planned by IALI and covering issues identified yesterday as difficulties or challenges that national labor inspectorates has to face.
Thank you, Mikhail, for the excellent questions. Just to clarify a bit, IALI do not issue standards per se. We issue guidelines. Maybe you mean the same thing. And the list of countries that I've presented just now was extracted from the handbook, which was the case studies of some of these countries that adopted the measuring methodology to show that how their program and initiative has been successful as well. And they adopted these things so that when we compile all this information, it shows that how each individual country and the various programs, sometimes can be at the program level, sometimes can be at the national level, they show that how it has been successful in terms of achieving the outcome that they've set themselves. And all these examples in the handbook will clearly illustrate the success factors that they have achieved as a result of using that measuring performance, right? Another area that we developed was the IBOR, as you mentioned, is the international benchmarking of OSH regulation. Again, it's not so much as a standard, but a method and a guideline to show how you can benchmark your own system and framework against some international norms, so to speak. Maybe you can call it standard as well, right? But we don't really set standard per se, because as an international organization for labor inspection, we recognize that every country has its own unique circumstances and unique method of doing things. And there's no one standard way. But something that's common is that how you want to achieve the outcome that you want. That's more important. And that's how we structure our guidelines and our framework along that line. I hope I answered that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Research institutes and agencies outline the key role of preventive culture in enterprise for developing appropriate level of occupational safety and health. One of the tasks of Senior Labor Inspectors Committee for 2021-2027 is updating of existing SLIC guideline for labor inspectors, fostering preventive culture in small and micro enterprises. taking into account experiences of COVID period and the new EU strategic framework with Vision Zero as one of its most important elements. That is leading me to the question addressed to Helmut. You have mentioned the plans of ISSA to develop a Vision Zero guideline for labor inspectors. How do you see the role of labor inspectors in developing preventive culture in inspected entities?
Thank you. Yeah, this labor inspectors have an extremely important role in not only in caring for compliance and for enforcement, but also for go beyond, because please remember the video we have seen from Singapore. I mean, this is the core of what all of us here in the room are doing. And in many countries, the labor inspections and the inspectors are the most important group to create change in industry. Sometimes there is only little competence in OSH expertise in the companies, and then it has to be implemented. And for me, the cultural change is not, sometimes people think it is for you have everything and then you come to culture. No, you must start at every level to make a change and to start your way. So it is something like a positive virus. We should spread all over the world, not a coronavirus, yeah, but it's a positive Vision Zero virus. And yeah, we want to support this with this joint activity. I would say it's not an activity of ISSA. We do it together with the labor inspectors, with IALI, and I would like to invite all of you to comment soon. If we have a draft, we can circulate it, and it should be our guide or our tool and not somebody's tool. I think we must unite.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that we still cannot be connected with Joachim. So before the last question I would like to address to Chief Labor Inspector, I am asking the audience if anyone would like to or have a question to our experts. No hands in the air, so my final question I would like to address to Mrs. Katarzyna Łażewska-Hrycko. Having in mind the sessions of both days of the conference, what conclusions could you formulate as a person being in charge of the National Labor Inspectorate? Can the authority that you manage learn from presented experiences of other labor inspectorates? Can analyze activity can be inspired by the standards developed by and promoted by international organizations?
So I believe this is an extremely important meeting. It has been an extremely important meeting. And what's most inspiring to me personally, considering those 2 days of talks and discussions, both during the networking sessions and at the panel discussions, is primarily the very awareness that a lot connects us, even though we represent different countries. What's in store for us is precisely the same challenges and issues. However, what I also have noticed that creates the rapport, creates the common ground, is this incredible passion and involvement. As Helmut has just mentioned, he said this positive virus as far as the matters of occupational safety and health, transmission of information, dissemination of information on this matter. So regardless of the countries we come from, we should definitely spread this positive virus. we should actually spread this to our partners, to those that we control, but also in terms of our preventive and promotional activity. It should also be marked with this virus. And for that involvement, for your contribution, is something that I would like to thank. And before I pass on to these official things, what I would like to underscore here is that we are glad to have these international regulations that set us a kind of a reference point. And under the operations of the Polish Labour Inspectorate, we do refer to the norms of international labor, International Labour Organization and the International Association of Social Security. And what I'm absolutely convinced about is that, well, having this opportunity of contacting you and exchanging experience and information with all of you, it is just a matter of professionalism. And we should all aim at being effective and efficient in our work as labor inspectors. And we have to do all in our power to cater to and respond to these challenges of the future. There were so many different threads, so many different problems raised during these 2 days of conference that I believe that we will be leaving Wrocław with a sense of being unsatiated. But this is something good, actually. This is something that will push us towards deepening our knowledge and experience, something that will never leave us sate. But also that will give us an opportunity to actually set these standards and points of reference for our daily work. And making the most of this opportunity of being able to speak as a kind of a conclusion of this conference, I would like to thank everybody, all the speakers, all those that delivered their presentations, who came to Wrocław from various parts, various corners, sometimes very distant corners of the world. Thank you for your contribution, for your involvement. It is truly precious to us to be your host. Thank you for having shared your expertise, your sensitivity, especially sensitivity to the problems of occupational safety and health. We consider this to be truly valuable, since we as hosts had this opportunity to have you here. I would also like to thank a person without whom this conference would have never happened. The originator of this conference, Michał Wyszkowski. I truly believe that you know him by heart from his international cooperation. This is truly a person without whom this conference would have never happened. I would like to thank everybody that maybe not were visible, that were not in the spotlight, that work at the office of the Chief Labour Inspector, Ewa Goślin. To you I send best regards and thanks to all of you whose input, whose work that lasted for about 6 months to prepare this conference. Thanks to your contribution, we could create this very friendly atmosphere, have this fantastic creative vibe, and making use of this fantastically neatly organized time. I would also like to thank the director of this center for giving us this opportunity of spending some quality time here in Wrocław, for opportunity to get in contact with both the nature surrounding us here at the Szczytnicki Park, but also for your fantastic assistance. I'd like to thank technical staff without whom this conference would have never happened. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy that together we could spend these 2 days. I hope that this is a component of our cooperation that will last, that will be continued, that will see some follow-up. So come to Poland, visit Poland, not just for professional reasons, but also, have a sight of our beautiful country. Having said that, I'd like to thank you all warmly.
Thank you very much. Not only for an answer, but also for organizing this conference. Well, organizing of such conference is possible when the Chief Labour Inspector, from the beginning of her mission, takes care of her vision of managed labor inspectorate as a competent, modern and innovative authority. Thank you also for that. It is now time to close the event. There is no special need for concluding the conference because the Chief Labor Inspector did it perfectly, answering the last question of the panel discussion. Summarizing conclusion with one sentence, I can say that there are a lot of challenges in the changing world, but we can face them with success, especially when we do it together. I would also like to thank interpreters for their hard work during 2 days of the conference. Thank you very much. And I would like to inform all participants that a recording of the conference in English and Polish will be available on the website of the National Labor Inspectorate of Poland, as well as presentation of our experts of 2 days of conference. Thank you very much for your attention. It was honor and pleasure to host almost 500 participants from more than 40 countries and 3 continents. Goodbye.